Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's review, we are taking a look at the newest fairway driver in Climo Disc Golf's lineup. We're taking a look at the Streak. First, just want to say if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and smash that like button. It's free for you to do and it really helps out the channel. I greatly appreciate the support. Starting with the profile, there is a very quick rise to the shoulder and then a slight amount of dome, but despite that, it actually has a very thin profile and a shallow feel. In this signature line plastic, it has a decent amount of grip and tackiness and good flexibility. If you're looking for something a little bit stiffer, you might want to take a look at the Victory line plastic. Since the Streak does have that thinner profile, it doesn't quite fill my backhand grip, but when it comes to forehand, it fits fairly well. Even though it does have that slight dome, the signature line plastic allows me to manipulate the flight plate so I can get a very comfortable forehand grip. Don't know if it was a typo on the PDGA website, but that max weight of 179 grams for the Streak, whew, I would love to see how those fly. Well, when it comes to the flight numbers, the Streak, speed 7, glide 5, turn 0, and a fade of 1, placing the Streak in that slower yet controllable fairway driver slot. Just a quick disclaimer, the signature line is the most understable run that I threw, but a little bit later on in the video we will get into the other plastics and how it affected the flight. Okay, speaking of flight, at least for the signature line, when I give it a healthy amount of hyzer, it wants to flip up near flat. Doesn't quite get there, but it wants to flip up and have a nice arcing hyzer, kind of a good forward pushing hyzer finish. But once you start throwing it with just a little bit of hyzer, you can get it to flip up. And as you notice, it even still has enough understability in the middle part of the flight that it still does get a little bit of a panning turn before it slows down and then just has the most baby of fade back. Which means once I start leveling out that angle of release and start throwing it near flat, you're going to notice a good amount of a panning turn in that kind of middle part of the flight. It did have a bit of fade, but I think that's more due to the height than the actual overstability of the disc. This is not a very overstable disc by any means, at least in this plastic, as we're going to see later. It has a decent amount of fade if, again, you give it height. If you throw it low, you're not really going to get too much of a fade back, but as long as you do give it some height as it slows down, as it stalls, it doesn't have quite an extreme amount of a forward pushing finish as some very understable discs, but it just kind of stalls, and then as you see, it just kind of falls out of the sky. When thrown on the hyzer, it was holding a bit of that more arcing forward hyzer, but when you're throwing it flat or on a turnover, as soon as it slows down, it's going to kind of just fade, just kind of dump more at the end. But at least in this plastic, it holds angles very well. You put it on a slight anhyzer, it was holding the slight anhyzers for about 3/4 of the flight before it leveled out and had that stalling finish. And then once you start putting it on these more extreme anhyzers, you can get it to hold those turns all the way to the ground. Again, specifically if you're throwing it on a low angle of release instead of high. When it comes to forehanding the signature line, you're going to want to give it a good amount of hyzer. It is going to flip up in order to hold that straighter line with just that baby finish, versus once you do start throwing it flat, you're going to notice this good amount of a panning turn before just that little bit of a fade as it stalls, making the signature line Streak better for the finesse shots instead of power forehand shots. A couple more items to quickly touch on. The Streak overall has a good amount of glide to it. It's something you don't have to rip into extremely hard to get it to go. It is going to ride on the air and give you a decent amount of distance even if you do not throw it very hard. But because the Streak is on the kind of neutral to understable side of the spectrum, specifically in this plastic, you want to avoid throwing this in the wind. So I want to show you guys how I like to throw the Streak when out on the course. First, I mentioned that incredible amount of glide. I feel like I can just effortlessly put it out there and it is just going to glide an incredibly long way. Also, it's good for hyzer flipping because of that low resistance to torque in the earlier part of the flight. You can get it to flip up to flat. Depending on the angle, maybe you get a panning turn, maybe it rides very straight with just a baby finish, and then those nice controlled turnovers where you get a little bit of a pan and then it'll level itself out at the end of the flight. But then also for those more extreme turnovers, just give it a little bit more angle, a little bit more height, and it is going to hold that turn. However, that doesn't mean that the streak is a neutral disc. You are going to have to manipulate the angle of release if you want to get it to hold a hyzer, or if you want it to go absolutely dead straight on a hyzer flip. You're going to get quite a bit of that turn in the middle part of the flight and then a fade back depending on the height. I mentioned earlier in the video that the different plastic types will affect the flight. Well, the Victory line, that is going to be your go-to for a straight streak with a predictable finish. It definitely has a bit more torque resistant than the Signature line, which makes it great for backhand straight shots, as well as for forehand straight to hyzer shots. And with that added torque resistance, it does hold up pretty well in a 5 to 10 mile an hour headwind. And if the Victory line doesn't do it for you, well, you're in luck because there's one more option. In this glow plastic, at least right out of the box, for us slower arm speed players, it is a good overstable option of the streak. If you throw it flat, it's going to ride straight for about 2/3 of the flight, and then you're going to notice it check up and start to hyzer, which also means that for forehand, you can actually trust it not flat. You can actually put it on a forced over flex line and you know it's not going to fully flip over, it's going to come back. Same thing for backhand, you can put it on a little bit of an anhyzer line, trust it to ride straight through a tunnel and then fade at the end. Overall, I feel the streak can hit a lot of different lines. The Signature version is going to be very good for turnover shots, for hyzer flip shots. It's going to cover that neutral, straight to understable side of the spectrum. The Victory is going to be your slight wind fighter, kind of the next step up, and then the Glow is going to be more for those power throwers. So it's definitely a disc that can offer a wide variety of shots to a wide variety of players. And it's also that Speed 7 sweet spot, so it's nice and controllable, but nets you a lot of distance. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and if you want to try out the streak for yourself, be sure to visit GreatLakesDisc.com. Till the next time, keep banging them chains.